This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
UN chief urges continued international support for Mali amid growing terrorist threat. A dozen Ivorian soldiers killed in a terrorist attack near the border with Burkina Faso. And the World Health Organization warns of accelerating coronavirus cases in Africa. This is Africa Live. A warm welcome to the show. I am Peninah Karibe, also lined up this hour. Tunisia government lifts lockdown due to reduced COVID-19 cases. And in sports, top-flight footballers in Ethiopia come to terms with the league's cancellation. We begin in Mali, where the United Nations has expressed grave concerns over the security situation there. Fighting in the West African country has taken a heavy toll on the local population. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said terrorist activity is continuing to fuel violence between communities.
The escalating conflict between communities in central Mali is raising concern. Hundreds of civilians have been killed and thousands displaced since March 2018.
I'm appalled by allegations of summary killings and executions of at least 38 civilians by the Malian armed forces in two villages in Mopti region last weekend, in one case with the support of traditional hunters. I welcome the government's announcements to investigate these serious violations, and I call on the authorities to do everything possible to hold the perpetrators of these heinous crimes accountable.
Terrorists and other armed groups have capitalized on the COVID-19 pandemic, complicating the already extremely challenging situation.
Mali has not been spared by the virus, and neither has our peacekeeping mission on the ground. More than 100 United Nations personnel have been affected. While many of them have recovered, 2 peacekeepers lost their lives, and we mourn this loss. I'm encouraged by the swift action taken by the government to respond to the pandemic in close cooperation with MINUSMA and other international partners.
Despite the challenges, the country has been making inroads politically, raising much hope among the Malian people. The country held successful legislative elections back in March and April. Government has initiated intercommunal dialogues to resolve tensions and differences.
We encourage the Malian authorities to continue with its efforts to accelerate the disarmament, demobilization, reintegration operations and persist in it until its finalization. It is only with a finalized DDR that we can achieve a total disarmament of armed groups and bring peace to Mali.
The number of people in need of assistance in Mali is expected to increase to 5 million people in the next months. The UN is calling for renewed international action to avert this and destabilize effects of COVID-19. Chom Rono, CGTN.
Soldiers wounded in an attack on a Côte d'Ivoire military post near the northern border with Burkina Faso have been flown back to Abidjan. At least 10 soldiers were killed and 6 wounded on Thursday. It is not yet clear which group carried out the pre-dawn hit. The head of the armed forces, Lassina Doumbia, said in a statement that one of the assailants was killed. This assault is said to be the deadliest in the country since gunmen killed 19 people in the beach resort of Grand Bassam in March 2016. All troops in the region remain on high alert and a search operation is underway for the attackers.
We are soldiers. You will heal and get back on the field in the name of the ones who died. I'm counting on you.
We were told there were wounded soldiers, so we sent the Air Force immediately so as to bring our wounded back as soon as possible.
No blessés.
U.S. President Donald Trump has issued an executive order authorizing sanctions against investigators from the International Criminal Court. The targeted investigators are involved in an inquiry into whether American forces committed war crimes in Afghanistan. The decision has prompted reactions from the United Nations and the European Union.
The latest decision overarches United States allies, including Israel, for possible crimes in Afghanistan and elsewhere. The United Nations has expressed concern following the move.
We're also aware that there have been previous statements by the U.S. Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, that any restrictions taken against individuals would be implemented consistently with the host country's obligations under the UN headquarters agreement. We'll obviously continue to follow very closely any developments on this issue.
Financial assets of the employees of the International Criminal Court are set to be blocked. Together with their immediate families, they will also be barred from entering the US. Trump says the investigations by the ICC have threatened to infringe on the nation's national sovereignty.
The cooperation between the UN and the ICC is based on the, quote, the relationship agreement, which was approved by the General Assembly in 2004. And so obviously we'll be looking at any possible implications that this development may have in respect to the implementation of the agreement.
Meanwhile, the European Union says that it stands in solidarity with the International Court. Josep Borrell, the EU's foreign diplomacy chief, spoke on the matter.
Look, I learned this very bad news when I was finishing the meeting of the council, and I learned this on the stairs coming here. So my answer has to be cautious because I don't know exactly the extent of this decision. I cannot react on the spot on everything. For sure, this is a matter of serious concern, as you can understand, because we, as European Union, we are steadfast supporters of the International Criminal Court. I think that for sure I can reiterate our support to this institution.
That no matter how long it takes.
ICC prosecutor Fatou Bensouda wants to investigate possible crimes committed between 2003 and 2014. These include the alleged mass killings of civilians by the Taliban and torture of prisoners by Afghan authorities, and, to a lesser extent, by US forces. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Meanwhile, the International Criminal Court has welcomed the arrest of former Sudanese militia leader Ali Kushaib. Kushaib has been on the ICC's wanted list since 2007. He is accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity allegedly committed between 2003 and 2004 in Darfur. Robert Nagila has the details.
Accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity, the former Darfur militia leader Ali Kushaib is said to have surrendered himself voluntarily in the northern town of Birao in the Central African Republic. According to the International Criminal Court, he was flown to the Netherlands on Tuesday. ICC Chief Prosecutor Fatou Bensouda described the arrest as a pivotal moment.
I hope that the suspect's transfer to the court also sends a clear and unequivocal message that no matter how long it takes or the obstacles placed in our path, my office will not stop until the alleged perpetrators of Rome Statute crimes are brought to justice.
Kushaib, a commander of the pro-government Popular Defense Forces, is accused of leading attacks on towns and villages during the Darfur conflict that killed hundreds of thousands of people and drove more than 2 million from their homes. The ICC issued an arrest warrant for Kushaib in 2007, accusing him of murder, rape and pillage in the western Sudanese region of Darfur between 2003 and 2004.
I remain hopeful that a new chapter of constructive ICC Sudan engagement, rooted in mutual respect and a genuine commitment to bringing justice for the victims of heinous crimes committed in Darfur, may be on the horizon.
Kushaib is one of 6 men wanted by the ICC for crimes in Darfur. The list of suspects includes former Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir, who was ousted by the military in 2019 after months of protests against his rule. The ICC issued an arrest warrant for Bashir in 2008, accusing him of war crimes, genocide and crimes against humanity. He was sentenced to 2 years in detention by a court in Sudan in December last year. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has launched the Roadmap for Digital Cooperation, which aims to connect and protect people in the digital age. The launch happened while he was addressing a virtual high-level event on the state of the digital world. The roadmap has 8 core areas of cooperation, which include universal connectivity, digital capacity building, and artificial intelligence. Guterres said the world needs to harness digital connectivity to overcome the COVID-19 pandemic and to have a sustainable and inclusive recovery.
Digital technology is central to almost every aspect of the response to the pandemic, from vaccine research to online learning models, e-commerce, and tools that are enabling hundreds of millions of people to work and study from home. But the digital divide is now a matter of life and death for people who are unable to access essential healthcare information. It is threatening to become the new face of inequality, reinforcing the social and economic disadvantages suffered by women and girls, people with disabilities, and minorities of all kinds.
U.S. President Donald Trump has made his first policy proposal since protests erupted after the death of African-American man George Floyd. It comes as his top general said he was wrong to appear alongside Trump during a controversial photo op. Our White House correspondent Nathan King reports.
That Monday evening, minutes after protesters had been violently cleared from Lafayette Square in front of the White House, Army General Mark Milley, the nation's highest-ranking military officer, joined US President Trump in that now infamous photo op at St. John's Church. Later, as the sun set over the city, he inspected the scene in downtown Washington, D.C., not in some foreign land, but in the capital of the United States. He says he now regrets that day deeply.
I should not have been there. My presence in that moment and in that environment created a perception of the military involved in domestic politics. As a commissioned, uniformed officer, it was a mistake that I have learned from, and I sincerely hope we all can learn from it. We who wear the cloth of our nation come from the people of our nation, and we must hold dear the principle of an apolitical military that is so deeply rooted in the very essence of our republic.
The US President has made no secret of his preference for military men in his administration, but the divisions between him and the military have deepened since Trump took office. Defense Secretary Mark Esper publicly opposes deploying the military to quell protests. His predecessor, James Mattis, accused the president of being the divider-in-chief. And now there's widespread opposition to Trump's refusal to rename military bases currently named after Civil War Confederate generals. In Dallas, at a roundtable discussion aimed at healing the country, the US president pledged to back economic development for minority communities, and Trump said he will issue an executive order encouraging police to use force with compassion. And he rejected moves to cut police funding and defended his decision to deploy National Guard troops on the streets of America.
I called, I said, I'm sorry, we have to have them go in. And they went in, and it was like a knife cutting butter right through, boom. I'll never forget, you saw the scene on that road, wherever it may be, in the city, Minneapolis. They were lined up, boom, they just walked straight. And yes, there was some tear gas and probably some other things, and the crowd dispersed.
The US president has dubbed himself the law and order president, defending the vast majority of police officers and pointing his finger at his political rivals, falsely accusing them of wanting to abolish law enforcement entirely. Political unity in a time of pandemic and protests seems as far away as ever. Nathan King, CGTN at the White House.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up to 1:15, we're taking our first break. Coming up. WHO warns of accelerating COVID-19 cases in Africa. And China makes second donation of anti-COVID-19 medical supplies to Zimbabwe.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore, We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
The World Health Organization says COVID-19 cases in Africa are accelerating. It took almost 100 days for the cases on the continent to reach the 100,000 mark, but only 18 days for that number to double. South Africa, Algeria and Cameroon have been cited as hotspots which are in need of strong public health measures. Over 98,000 people have so far recovered in Africa, with nearly 6,000 deaths. Government officials in one province in South Africa are calling for the reintroduction of an alcohol ban that was recently lifted due to a spike in crime levels. More cases of crime, including murder, have been reported in both the Eastern and Western Cape areas since the resumption of the sale of alcohol. CGTN's Travis Andrews has the details.
It's been like this ever since the prohibition of alcohol was lifted. A long line of customers queuing outside liquor stores throughout the Western Cape. Many have been stocking up on alcohol out of fear that a new ban could be in the pipeline. But the Western Cape government, though, is taking a different approach to its Eastern Cape counterpart.
We must be very careful and get the balance right, in my opinion. We mustn't, in any point, kind of close down the economy completely. But we have seen, if we manage and police the alcohol sales carefully, and that includes distribution of alcohol into our townships over weekends. If we manage and control and police that properly, we can bring down the number of alcohol-related murders, etc.
Statistics show most murders are occurring from Monday to Thursday when alcohol sales are allowed, and the informal townships have become hotspots. Since lockdown regulation 3 kicked in, the strong visual policing presence of roadblocks has been removed and restrictions of movement has been relaxed.
I'm just really worried about going to a police state. We have a constitution in this country and we still need to adhere to those clauses in the constitution that speaks to very basic and fundamental rights of all citizens. And I think one must always just respect that and remember that. And we need to work out. The issue is not necessarily blocking everything, closing and banning. The issue is us managing it, policing it properly so that we can solve the problem.
For now, the local alcohol industry is embracing for a new ban just yet, but that's not stopping concerned consumers of waiting for hours each day to purchase their favorite tipple. While hospitals such as this are filling up with patients admitted for alcohol-related incidents, some even requiring beds earmarked for COVID-19 patients, the Western Cape government still believes it has a tightrope to walk and that urging responsible drinking instead of prohibition is the correct way forward. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Meanwhile, in Uganda, air pollution from Kampala's congested traffic has been a long-standing problem. COVID-19 lockdowns around the world have significantly reduced pollution levels, and there has been a global push to keep it that way. That's why 2 Ugandan innovators are hoping to make motorbikes go electric, as Leon Sinyanga reports from Kampala.
In the suburbs of Kampala, a motorbike taxi driver powers his way through the streets, just as many others do daily. With one main difference, his electric bike is quieter and cleaner and costs him a lot less to maintain.
I got this bike because I don't have to spend much with mechanics like we usually do. Besides, it's a unique bike.
It takes about 2 hours to fully charge the bike's batteries. The innovators of this particular model are hoping they catch on.
The main difference between an electric bike and a petrol bike is, of course, electricity and petrol. Now, what does that mean for someone who rides a bike business-wise? The petrol drivetrain, the fuel powertrain, has a lot of moving parts, piston rings, seals, gaskets. You need to lube all those parts. It's a lot of maintenance. Now, the electric drivetrain is virtually maintenance-free.
The e-bike can cover about 70 kilometers on a full charge, and cleaner motorbike taxis could transform the city's air quality.
We have very bad air quality in Kampala, and at the same time those people riding those bodas have also very little income because all their money goes on fuel, oil, maintenance. So we think we have to change something here. We all agree that in the next 10 or 20 years the world will be electric or roll electric.
The price tag on one of these bikes is $1,500. More than 20 electronic-powered motorbikes have been developed here and are already in use. There are also plans to make electric-powered cars. The company wants to transform from 2 to 4 wheels, but it's still a work in progress.
If you look at this axle, this is an axle of a small car popular in Africa. African seed is called Vitz. So we just adapted it, we have the motor hubs here, we have the batteries. So in this case, you will have 2 batteries because you just need a much more bigger capacity, It will go up to buses and things like that.
Uganda currently runs 2 electric-powered buses. That could be the future of commuting around town. For now, the e-bike is likely to help many like Chiza go a long way without spending too much. Leon Sanyanga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
In over a dozen U.S. states, coronavirus cases continue to climb. It's caused fears a second wave may be on the way. Here's more on that story.
Over 2 million infections. The U.S. is now home to around 1 in 4 of both cases and deaths around the world. The death toll from COVID-19 now stands at over 110,000, and in over a dozen states, cases are still trending upwards. Arizona, Utah and New Mexico posted an increase of over 40% in the first week of June. In Florida, Arkansas, South and North Carolina, cases rose by over 30%. In some of these areas, the number of people needing critical care is also up. North Carolina's ICUs are operating at 87% capacity, and hospitalization rates in Texas have broken records for 3 days in a row. The trend is causing growing concern. Researchers now predicting that deaths in the US could reach nearly 300,000 later this year.
We are now forecasting through to October 1st, just shy of 170,000 deaths, but with a very large range, 133 to 290,000 deaths. And part of that range is just quite making sense of what's happening in some of the states, such as Arizona.
Arizona earlier this week repeated calls for hospitals to fully activate emergency plans. This came after the state's largest medical network warned nearly all its ICU beds were being used. It also said ventilator use in the state had quadrupled since mid-May. On Thursday, a more grim forecast put the death toll at 200,000 by the end of the summer. Harvard's Dr. Ashish Jha telling local US media the numbers were more concerning than he had hoped.
If we just stay flat, if we don't have any more spikes all summer and just stay flat, we'll continue to have 800 to 1,000 people dying every day. So sometime in September, we're going to cross 200,000, and we still won't be done. Right? This pandemic is going to be with us till next spring or summer when we have a vaccine.
Some say the rising numbers are a result of increased testing. Others say they stem from eased lockdowns over the Memorial Day weekend. Second wave or not, it looks as if COVID-19 is there to stay for a while yet. Nicole N, CGTN.
Meanwhile, new cases of COVID-19 are down in New York City, but officials warn that infection rates remain high in some neighborhoods, many of them low-income communities of color. As CGTN's William Denslow reports, the city has vowed to address this disparity.
For protesters here, the death of George Floyd exposed deep racial inequalities in the US. But so has the COVID-19 pandemic. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says racial and ethnic minority groups are disproportionately impacted by the virus.
Everywhere in the country, African Americans are dying at COVID at rates that are far disproportionate to their population in those states or those cities. And that's a clear statement that Black lives don't matter.
Brownsville is a predominantly black neighborhood in New York's Brooklyn borough. A 2017 report found 40% of its population living in poverty. Each week, United for Brownsville and a coalition of other partners distributes essential goods to roughly 600 people. As well as food, it's now also providing personal protective equipment to the local community.
The overall coronavirus infection rate in New York is around 20%, but there are a number of hotspots across the city. Here in Brownsville, the infection rate is over 40%.
New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo says the virus didn't attack equally and hit low-income and minority areas the hardest. And he's vowed to add more COVID-19 testing sites to these neighborhoods.
We're not getting support. Nobody's standing up for us. I'm glad that the governor, is saying all of these great things on TV. But when it gets passed down, or how it gets passed down to the community, it's slow to come.
Officials are also promising to boost education and the availability of PPE and hand sanitizer in these communities. Some medical professionals say that while disasters may not create healthcare disparities, they do expose them.
The disparities and the systemic weaknesses that create vulnerabilities in communities of color for Black and Brown people, regardless of where they live, are going to manifest in critical and sometimes fatal ways during these types of crises.
Officials say they're committed to curbing the spread of COVID-19 in neighborhoods like Brownsville. But residents want to see more done to end broader inequalities that far predate the coronavirus pandemic. William Denslow, CGTN, New York.
Let's take a short break. Coming up in business news. Tunisia government lifts lockdown due to reduced COVID-19 cases. And Uganda's budget for 2020-2021 totals $12.2 billion.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
Official data shows Britain's GDP in April saw the sharpest monthly decline ever. Finance Minister Rishi Sunak says the economy shrunk by over 20%. The UK was under lockdown the entire month. Sunak says government measures, including tax cuts, have given the economy the best chance to recover after it reopens. The country's outbreak is the second deadliest in the world, with the fifth highest number of cases. Elsewhere, the total number of U.S. layoffs caused by COVID-19 has reached 44.2 million people. That comes even as businesses try to reopen and analysts warn of continuing damage to the world's largest economy. New data showed another 1.5 million workers filed for unemployment benefits last week. The massive layoffs have become routine since shutdowns to stop the coronavirus from spreading began in mid-March. Some workers are back as states reopen, but the total number of jobless for the week ended June 6th remains well above any figure seen during the global financial crisis. Tunisia's government has ordered the lifting of a nationwide curfew imposed in March to contain the spread of the coronavirus. The decision came after health authorities said they continued to see a drop in the number of infections. The country had already reopened shops, businesses, mosques, cafes and hotels after locking down nearly all normal business for over 2 months. CGTN's Adnet Shawashi reports.
Prime Minister Elias Al-Farfer has informed the President about the implementation of Phase 3 of the targeted health deconfinement. All businesses have reopened in the capital city Tunis, as well as in the 23 other regions across the North African country.
Tunisians have returned to normalcy thanks to the effort of all ministries and stakeholders. Yes, we have succeeded in controlling the epidemiological situation. Ending the curfew will allow consumers, shoppers and domestic tourists, as well as businesses, to resume a normal life and boost the economy.
Over 6,124 mosques across the country have reopened in the last phase of exit from the COVID-19 lockdown. Over 1 million people headed to the mosques this week.
Maintaining the successful reopening depends on the adherence of Tunisians to the measures that have been set, while a closure will be decreed if any confirmed case is reported. We are working with the COVID-19 task force to ensure the safety of millions of worshippers.
The ministry in charge of major national projects has reported that the lifting of the last prevention measures has been successful. Authorities added that work on 4,000 infrastructure projects worth $2.2 billion has resumed nationwide.
The resumption of 100% normal activity includes the public service, all industrial sectors and services, public works and construction. All malls, public spaces, hotels, restaurants, cafes and cultural centers have reopened. The operation has been successful on all levels.
Public transportation has resumed full activity and inter-region travel has been permitted. The COVID-19 task force has also decided that air, land and sea borders will reopen on June the 27th. According to the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the repatriation of thousands of Tunisians who are still stranded in Africa, Europe and the Gulf region will begin next week. Priority will be given to Tunisian students as well as residents having lost their jobs due to the COVID-19 crisis. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Tanzania's hotel and travel industry has been hard hit by the coronavirus pandemic, which hampered international travel. However, some industry players are showing signs of recovery after the government allowed the resumption of flights into the country. One of Tanzania's first 5-star hotels, the Hyatt Regency, which was closed since early April, has been reopened. CGTN's Daniel Kijo has more.
The Hyatt Kilimanjaro is one of the most popular hotels in Tanzania. Known as the Kili, this legendary hotel has been a landmark in Dar es Salaam since the mid-1960s. Despite its rich history, it too was not immune to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. But after more than 2 months of being closed, it has been reopened for business. The Regional Commissioner Paul Makonda says COVID-19 is no longer something to stop businesses from operating.
There's no need to fear. Businessmen should do their business, bars should be open, those who own bands should play music, even clubs. As long as they stay socially distant, they wear masks and sanitize, they are free to do business.
After suspending all international flights as one of the measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus 2 months ago, Tanzania is now encouraging foreign tourists and business visitors to fly into the country. The Kilimanjaro's management says the nature of business has changed, but they've adapted accordingly.
We are able to do or to continue the business because all what we need to do is to maintain the social distancing, wearing the mask and all other protective details that we should take.
The tourism sector contributes $2 billion to the country annually, accounting for 25% of all exchange earnings. Downtown Dar es Salaam is home to over 100 hotels, but not all of them are open for business. Overlooking Dar es Salaam Harbour and the Indian Ocean, this strip is a hotbed for the country's biggest hotels. But it's also a contrast of business approach. While the Hyatt Kilimanjaro has reopened, Johari Rotana, just down the road, remains closed. So as it opens its doors, Hyatt is hoping that its decision will be rewarding. Over the last 2 weeks, hotels, restaurants and tour operators have been getting certified under new strict health measures set out by the government. The Tourism Ministry has come up with Standard of Operations, or SOPs, aimed at the promotion of the country's tourism industry in the COVID-19 outbreak. Some measures include digitizing menus as a way to reduce unnecessary surface contact.
We have introduced a new menu, an online menu, from which you can scan through the QR codes, then you can get it through your phone. Then through there you can go through all the menu and you can order whatever you want.
The government of Tanzania is still asking tourists and locals to frequently wash hands, use face masks and practice social distancing, and to report any symptoms if they arise. But it's hoped that as the Kilimanjaro opens its doors, others can follow suit as a way to save the sector. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Meanwhile, Uganda has presented its budget estimates for the 2020-2021 financial year with $12.2 billion. The biggest portion of the budget will go towards financing infrastructure projects, security, debt repayments, education and health. CGTN's Michael Baleke reports.
Uganda's financial plan comes at a time when economic activity has severely contracted following the COVID-19 pandemic. But Uganda's finance minister has told Parliament that the country's economic outlook looks positive and says the 2020-2021 budget will help it to fully recover.
The focus of the budget for next financial year places emphasis on supporting livelihoods and the recovery of business enterprise without losing focus on our long-term development initiative. To this end, the government will support the private sector to scale up production, sustain and increase employment.
The Bank of Uganda projects in the year ahead, the economy will experience slow growth attributed to a combination of global supply chain disruptions, travel restrictions, measures to limit contact between persons, and the sudden decline in demand.
On the whole, household expenditure, investment, exports and imports are projected to decline in this year, 2020. Accordingly, the Bank of Uganda has revised down its projection of economic growth to a range of 2.5 to 3.5% in 2020.
But the finance minister believes prioritizing infrastructure like roads, the railway, electricity, investing in health, education plus industry will reignite the economy. Government has also waived interest on tax areas, deferred payment of corporation tax for 3 months, exempted VAT on hotels, liquefied gas and processed milk. According to Bank of Uganda, growth is projected to gradually recover, but there is significant uncertainty over the depth and duration of the current slowdown as the COVID-19 pandemic continues to spread. Critics argue that the current budget is more of a political document and does not address the key issues affecting the country today.
The implication again is that we're going to keep borrowing because we can't actually sustain the budget because people have lost jobs. Remember, government is able to get revenue through taxing people, pay as you earn and things like that. But where people are not working, where is government going to get the money?
Uganda's total debt now stands at more than $13 billion. The government says the budget will be revised to focus more on production as opposed to consumption, so that the country will be able to increase its exports in order to offset its growing debt. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
With borders closed and airlines grounded due to the COVID-19 pandemic, Africa's multi-billion-dollar tourism industry is coming apart. From Kenya's Masai Mara to Botswana's Okavango Delta, rural communities that depend on foreign and domestic tourist spending for their income are hurting. Conservation projects have not been spared either. Here's CGTN's Beryl Oro examining the grim future for game parks, lodges and travel agencies, even as countries gradually ease restrictions.
Hundreds of thousands depend on the tourism sector in Africa. In addition, the slump in tourist dollars has hit conservation projects hard. And even as countries around the world ease lockdown measures, game parks, lodges and travel agencies face a grim future.
We've made very few purchases of vehicles, and the most recent one was only a month before Corona struck, and in which therefore means that we are now sitting with vehicles that we're struggling to repay to the finances, and so things are very, very challenging right now because all business it's gone right now.
According to an estimate by Safari Bookings, the safari industry generates some $12.4 billion in annual revenue for South Africa, Botswana, Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, Uganda and Zambia, Africa's top wildlife tourist destinations. Over 300 tour operators were contacted by the online safari travel platform, and almost 93% reported a drop in bookings by at least 75% due to the pandemic.
It's been tough, and the toughest thing is the staff, because we've had to let the staff go. We paid them for the first month. Second month we paid a limited portion because TERS was kicking in, and yeah, we just ride in and out now. But it's not an indefinite thing. We don't know how long we can do this for.
A survey of close to 500 businesses in the Kruger-Lowveld district, South Africa's Safari Heartland, conducted by the local tourism agency last month, found that 90% of the operators believed they would not survive even if international borders opened immediately. Over two-thirds of them have laid off employees.
We save some of our money in the banks, but we just run out of money in the bank. So we'll start starving for now.
Beyond the human cost, conservationists worry that growing desperation in local communities hit by COVID-19 could fuel a wave of poaching. 3 popular game parks in South Africa recently dehorned dozens of rhinos as a preventative measure against poaching. South African Tourism Minister warned Parliament last month that up to 600,000 jobs were at risk if the sector remained shut until September. And the government's relief initiatives like the South Africa's offer of $3,000 one-time grants to small tourism businesses will do little to staunch the losses. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa has welcomed China's second donation of medical supplies to the African country. These supplies are expected to help Zimbabwe deal with the coronavirus pandemic. China has now donated more than 700,000 face masks, 21,000 testing kits, and 100,000 pieces of personal protective equipment to Zimbabwe.
It's the second batch of medical supplies from the Chinese government to Zimbabwe. It includes 165,000 surgical masks and over 25,000 pieces of personal protective equipment. The first batch of medical supplies was received in April.
On behalf of the government and people of Zimbabwe, and indeed on my own behalf, I express my gratitude to His Excellency Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China, for the assistance that he continues to give to our country, Zimbabwe. This is a clear demonstration of the comprehensive strategic partnership relationship between the two countries, Zimbabwe and the People's Republic of China. This support and the collaboration continues to have a tremendous impact on Zimbabwe's efforts to fight the pandemic and ensure that all our frontline workers have adequate protection in the course of their duties.
The donation ceremony was held at State House in the capital, Harare.
Let me conclude by reiterating our profound gratitude for the continued support from His Excellency and brother, President Xi Jinping, and the people and government of the People's Republic of China. And I wish that you convey our gratitude to His Excellency, the President Xi Jinping.
This donation is a testament to our time-tested friendship. With the Chinese government taking the lead, the Chinese military, business, and individuals are all stepping up, reaching out a helping hand to local governments, hospitals, schools, and homeless in Zimbabwe.
The Chinese ambassador to Zimbabwe says it will continue to support and provide assistance to Zimbabwe as it battles COVID-19.
This year marks the 40th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between our two countries. In the past 40 years, in solidarity, we won freedom. In solidarity, we defended justice and democracy in international relations. In solidarity, we stood strong in difficult times. And in solidarity, we safeguarded the achievements of national independence and national sovereignty and territorial integrity. So, brothers and sisters, let's brave the challenge ahead together. At the end of the tunnel is a bright future for our decades-old friendship and the well-being of our people.
Last month, China sent 12 medical experts to Zimbabwe for a 2-week program. The team shared the experience with their counterparts in Zimbabwe and provided prevention and treatment guidance. Cham Hono, CGTN.
Coming up in sports. Top flight footballers in Ethiopia come to terms with the league's cancellation.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Ethiopia has cancelled its Premier League football season due to the coronavirus pandemic. The decision was made after discussions between the government, the Ethiopian Football Federation and the Ethiopian Premier League Organizing Committee. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi has more from Addis Ababa.
Edwin Frimpong Manso is a Ghanaian player for the St. George Football Club in Ethiopia. For more than 2 months now, he has spent most of his time indoors with no games or training camps because of COVID-19. With the cancellation of the entire season, this period of inactivity will continue.
It's very unfortunate the league has been cancelled because we were looking forward to finishing the season. But unfortunately, we had high hopes to just finish the season and just go to CAF next year. But unfortunately, it has affected everybody, including our fans and the Ethiopian fraternity. So it's a very bad loss for us.
Patrick Matasi is a goalkeeper for the same team. He says the decision to cancel the season was necessary.
There's no need for them to risk taking the players and the fans to the field because this virus is a very dangerous virus, and it's better they control it and then you come back to the beach after around 3 to 4 months, then we start again playing.
The Ethiopia Football Federation has asked teams to keep players whose contracts were due to expire in June. The cancellation of the 16-team league means that Ethiopia will not have any representation in the African club competitions, such as the CAF Champions League and the CAF Confederations Cup next year. Coaches will have to find new ways to interact with players.
For the national team, we're preparing a training platform for players. I don't think the cancellation is a big problem, but if there is no motivation, we cannot do much. This, however, poses a big challenge for football. And to solve this, as coaches, we're discussing on different social media platforms how to reach out to players. We shall see the results with time.
Sports analyst Mansour Abdul Keni says Ethiopia's football industry has never been prepared for such an emergency.
The biggest challenge now is football is not ready for this kind of problems. Football don't know whether it's in pre-season time, on post-season time, or inter-season time. It's even very difficult to manage it for the professionals, for physios, for fitness coaches. You know, they don't know the formula, how they can make the players come back to the competition immediately. If the government opens everything by this time, it's very difficult to manage it, okay?
Edwin can't return home because of travel restrictions. As the debate continues on how to sustain Ethiopian football, players like him are working hard to stay fit. They know that when the time comes, they will be ready for kickoff. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Turning to the Spanish La Liga,